stars. But her last...
The rain came down in sheets, turning the alley behind the old casino into a black mirror. Marco Vitale stood under the overhang, collar turned up, cigarette forgotten between his fingers as it burned to ash. He watched her walk away, Isabella, the only person who'd ever made him feel something real, and every step she took felt like a blade twisting deeper. She didn't look back, not once. He'd told himself it was necessary. The Russians had him cornered, debts his father left behind, territory slipping through his fingers, a war he couldn't win without cash. They'd offered a deal, 1 night, 1 girl, 7 figures wired by morning. Isabella didn't know the details. She thought it was just another dinner with his associates. He'd kissed her goodbye like always, told her he'd be home by midnight. He never came home. Instead, he sat in a smoke-filled room while they took her. He told himself she'd be back by dawn untouched, just scared enough to make the point. The Russians kept their word on money. They didn't always keep their word on mercy. Marco dropped the cigarette, ground it under his heel, walked back inside. The casino floor was loud, slots chiming, laughter, the clink of chips, but it all sounded distant, like he was underwater. He went straight to his office, locked the door, poured whiskey he didn't drink, sat in the dark. Hours passed. His phone stayed silent. When dawn broke, pale and cold through the blinds, he finally called her number. It rang once, then a man, sir, answered. Thick accent, laughing. "She's pretty, Vitale. Too pretty for you." Marco's hand shook. "Where is she? You sold her. You don't get to ask questions." The line went dead. He stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. Then he stood, and the man who walked out of that office wasn't the same one who'd stood in the rain. Isabella woke in a room that smelled of diesel and salt. Her wrists were bound to a metal chair, tape over her mouth. The last thing she remembered was laughing at something Marco said, his hand warm on her thigh under the table. Then darkness, hands, a sharp sting in her neck. Now there was only the hum of a generator and the slow drip of water somewhere in the dark. Footsteps. The door opened. Light cut across the concrete floor. A man stepped in, tall, scarred face, eyes like dead fish. He pulled the tape off her mouth. Not gently. She didn't scream. She'd learned a long time ago that screaming didn't help. "Where's Marco?" Her voice was steady. She wouldn't give them tears. The man smiled. "He's the one who gave you to us." Isabella felt the words land like a slap. Then nothing. Just cold. He wouldn't. He did. The man crouched in front of her. 7 million. Cash. "You're worth more than he ever told you." She stared past him at the wall. Refused to let the tears fall. Inside, something cracked. Not her heart, her trust. Marco spent the next 3 days tearing the city apart. He called in every favor, burned every bridge, put prices on heads, threatened men who'd never feared him before. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, just moved relentless, cold, methodical. On the 4th day, one of his men found a lead, a warehouse on the docks. Russians had been moving girls through there for months. Marco went alone. He walked in like he owned the place, because once he had. They were waiting. 5 men, armed. He didn't draw a gun. He just looked at the one in front, the scarred one, and said, "Where is she?" The man laughed. "You sold her. She's gone." Marco stepped closer. "I'm going to ask again. Once." The man raised his gun. Marco moved faster. When it was over, there were 5 bodies on the floor, and Marco was bleeding from a graze on his arm he didn't feel. He found her in a back room chained to a pipe, bruised, eyes hollow. She looked up when he entered, didn't speak, just stared. He knelt, cut the chains with bolt cutters from his coat. His hands shook. "Isabella." She flinched when he reached for her. He froze. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." She looked at him for a long time. Then she stood slow, unsteady, walked past him, out the door, into the rain. He followed. She didn't look back. Marco didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of the bed in the hotel room he'd booked under a false name, elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet like it held answers. The room smelled of cheap cleaner and stale smoke. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. Every few minutes he checked his phone. No messages. No missed, sir. Calls, nothing from the Russians. Nothing from anyone. He kept seeing her face the moment she realized. Not anger, Not even fear, just blank, like something inside her had switched off when she heard the man's voice on the phone. He'd replayed it 100 times, the way her shoulders had dropped, the way she'd walked past him without a word, the rain soaking her dress as she disappeared around the corner. He should have run after her. He should have killed every man in that room. He should have never let it happen, but he'd stood there, frozen, while the deal closed and the money hit his account. 7 million. Enough to pay the debt, enough to buy time, enough to lose the only thing that had ever mattered. At 5 a.m, he stood up, showered cold water over his head until his skin burned, dressed in the same clothes, left the hotel without checking out. He went back to the casino. The floor was quiet, cleaning crew mopping, a few late-night gamblers still at the tables. He walked straight to his office, locked the door, opened his laptop. He started digging. Bank transfers, burner phones, security footage from the restaurant where they'd had dinner. Every camera angle he could access, every name the Russians had ever used in the city. By noon he had a location, a warehouse 20 miles out, near the old shipping yard, not the main one too obvious, a smaller building they used for holding. He knew because one of the men he'd killed last night had the address, scribbled on a receipt in his pocket. Marco didn't call for backup. He didn't tell anyone. He just drove. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, rusted metal, broken windows, weeds pushing through cracked concrete, but there were 2 black SUVs parked at the side. Lights on inside. He parked a block away, walked the rest, slipped through a side door that hadn't been locked properly. The interior was dim crates stacked high, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, voices echoed from deeper in. He moved silently, gun drawn but low. He found her in a small office at the back. She was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Bruises bloomed on her arms. Her hair had come loose, falling over her face. She didn't look up when he entered. She just said, "You're late." Marco felt the gun slip in his hand. He knelt in front of her, slow, careful. "Isabella." She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. No tears. Just flat, distant. "They told me you sold me," she said quietly. "I didn't believe them. Not at first." He reached for her. She flinched. He stopped. "I didn't have a choice," he said. The words tasted like ash. "You always have a choice." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "You chose the money." He closed his eyes. "I thought they'd bring you back. I thought you thought wrong." Silence stretched between them, thick, suffocating. Then she stood. Slowly, like every movement cost her. "I'm leaving," she said. He stood too. "Sir, let me take you home." She looked at him, really looked. "There is no home. Not anymore." She walked past him. He didn't stop her, but he followed, out of the warehouse, into the gray afternoon. She didn't look back. He kept pace, a few steps behind. She stopped at the edge of the lot, turned. "Go away, Marco." "I can't." "You already did." She started walking again. He followed. All the way to the bus station downtown. She bought a ticket. One way, north. He stood behind her at the counter, paid for it in cash. She didn't argue. When the bus pulled up, she climbed on without a word. He watched from the platform. She sat by the window. The bus started to pull away. At the last second, she looked back. Their eyes met through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked. Then the bus turned the corner, and she was gone. Marco stood there until the exhaust cleared. Then he walked back to his car, got in, drove, didn't stop until he reached the river, got out, stood on the bank, and screamed into the wind until his throat bled. Isabella didn't look out the window the entire bus ride. She kept her eyes on her, hands folded in her lap, knuckles white. The bruises on her wrists were already darkening, purple blooming under the skin like spilled ink. She traced them absently with her thumb. Felt nothing. The bus smelled of old vinyl and someone's half-eaten sandwich. A baby cried 2 rows back. A man snored across the aisle. Life kept moving. She didn't. When the bus, finally stopped in a small town 3 hours north, nothing more than a gas station, a diner, and a row of faded motels, she got off without a plan. She walked, past the diner, past the flickering neon sign that said vacancy, past the railroad tracks that cut the town in half. She found a room above a laundromat, paid cash for a week. The clerk didn't ask questions. She climbed the narrow stairs, locked the door behind her, and sat on the edge of the thin mattress. Then she cried, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, steady tears that soaked the collar of her dress until the fabric clung cold to her skin. She cried for the girl who'd laughed at Marco's stupid jokes, for the nights they'd stayed up talking until dawn, for the way he used to kiss her forehead like she was something precious. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she stood up, went into the tiny bathroom, washed her face with cold water, looked at herself in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back had hollow eyes and a bruise on her cheekbone. But she was still breathing. She took a shower-long scalding until the water ran cold, dried off with the scratchy towel, put on the only other clothes she had, a hoodie and jeans from the bottom of her bag. Then she sat at the small table by the window, pulled out the pregnancy test she'd bought at the gas station. 2 lines. She stared at it for a long time. Then she placed her hand on her stomach and whispered, "Okay." She didn't cry again. She made a plan, sir. Marco spent the next 3 weeks like a man possessed. He didn't go back to the casino, didn't answer calls, didn't sleep more than an hour at a time. He searched every bus station, every motel, every diner along the northern route. He showed her picture to clerks, waitresses, gas station attendants, paid cash for any scrap of information. Nothing. She'd vanished. He hired private investigators, hacked security footage, bribed people who didn't want to be bribed. Still nothing. By the 4th week he was unraveling. He stopped shaving, stopped eating anything that wasn't coffee. The empire he'd sold her to save began to slip territories contested, men whispering, old enemies circling. He didn't care. One night he drove to the river again, stood in the same spot, pulled out his phone, called her number. It rang and rang, then voicemail. Her voice soft, laughing filled the dark. "Hey, it's Isabella. Leave a message, or don't. I probably won't call back anyway." Beep. Marco closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "I'm so fucking sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was saving everything. I lost the only thing that mattered." He swallowed hard. "I'm looking for you. I'll keep looking. Until you tell me to stop. Until you look me in the eye and say you hate me. Until you tell me to go to hell. I'll be there, waiting." He ended the call, stared at the river. Then he got back in the car and kept driving. Isabella, sir. Found work at the diner, washing dishes, waiting tables, smiling at customers even when her feet ached and her back screamed from the pregnancy that was starting to show. She saved every tip, bought prenatal vitamins from the pharmacy down the street, told no one her real name. She rented a small apartment above the hardware store. 1 bedroom, peeling wallpaper, a window that looked out over the railroad tracks. Every night she placed her hand on her stomach, felt the small flutters, whispered, "We're okay." She didn't think about Marco. Not during the day, but at night when the town was quiet and the trains rumbled past, she dreamed of him, of the way he used to hold her, of the rain, of the moment she walked away. She woke with tears on her cheeks, wiped them away, told herself it was hormones, told herself she was stronger than this, told herself she didn't miss him. But some nights she sat by the window, watched the tracks disappear into the dark, and wondered if he was still looking. The apartment above the hardware store had one window that looked straight at the railroad tracks. Every night at 11:47 a.m., a freight train rumbled past, shaking the floorboards and rattling the single pane of glass. Isabella never closed the curtain. She liked the sound. It reminded her she was still moving forward, even if it felt like standing still. She was 5 months pregnant now. The bump was impossible to hide under loose sweaters, but the town was small enough that people didn't ask her questions. They just smiled when she walked into the diner for her shift, called her Han, and slipped extra pie onto her plate when they thought she wasn't looking. She worked mornings 6 to 2, came home, showered, ate whatever was cheap and filling, then sat by the window until the train came. Sometimes she placed her hand on her stomach and felt the small kick sharp, insistent, alive. She talked to the baby in whispers. "You're going to be strong," she'd say. "Stronger than me. Stronger than him." She never said his name. She didn't need to. Every time the phone rang, she checked the screen. Unknown numbers made her heart stutter. She never answered them. But she listened to the voicemails when they came. There were dozens now. Marco's voice rough, tired, sometimes slurred, filling the small room. I found the bus station. The clerk remembered you. Said you looked scared. I hate that I made you look scared. Another one weeks later. I paid off the Russians. All of it. They're out of the city. I thought it would feel like winning. It didn't. And one from last month, late at night. I saw a kid today. About 4, dark hair, gray eyes. He laughed at something his dad said, and I had to walk away. I couldn't breathe. I keep thinking, what if that was us? What if I hadn't the message cut off? She saved them all. Didn't listen every day, just on the nights when the loneliness felt heavier than the baby inside her. She told herself she hated him. She told herself she was, done. But some nights she replayed the oldest message, the one from the river. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. And she cried until the train came. The diner owner, Mrs. Callahan, 72, sharp eyes. Soft heart noticed the way Isabella touched her stomach when she thought no one was looking. One slow afternoon after the lunch rush, Mrs. Callahan slid a cup of decaf across the counter. How far along? Isabella froze, then exhaled. Almost 6 months. Mrs. Callahan nodded like she'd already known. You got a name picked out? Isabella looked down at the coffee. Not yet. Boy or girl? Boy. Mrs. Callahan smiled. Good. Boys need strong mamas. You're strong, kid. I can see it. Isabella's throat tightened. I don't feel strong. You're still standing, Mrs. Callahan said simply. That's strong enough. That night Isabella sat by the window again. The train came. She placed both hands on her stomach, felt a hard kick, and whispered, We're going to be okay. Marco found the town by accident. A tip from a truck driver who'd seen a pregnant girl waiting tables at a diner up north. Dark hair, quiet, bruises that had faded but not the look in her eyes. He drove all night, arrived at dawn. The diner was closed. He waited across the street, engine off, watching the door. At 6 sharp, she walked up. Same coat she'd worn the night she left, hair longer now, pulled back in a loose braid. The bump unmistakable under the fabric. She unlocked the door, went inside. Marco stayed, in the car. Watched her move behind the counter. Flip the sign to open. Pour coffee for the first customer. He didn't get out. He just watched. Until she looked up through the window. Across the street hand their eyes met. She froze. He didn't move. She stared for a long moment. Then she turned away, went back to work. Marco gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He waited until her shift ended, watched her walk home slow, careful steps, one hand on her lower back. She climbed the stairs above the hardware store, disappeared inside. He sat there until dark. Then he drove to the motel on the edge of town, checked in, and cried silent, ugly tears until the room smelled of salt and regret. The diner closed at 2. Isabella wiped down the last table, hung her apron on the hook, and stepped out into the pale February light. The air was sharp, carrying the faint smell of diesel from the tracks. She pulled her coat tighter around her growing belly and started the walk home, same route every day, past the hardware store, up the narrow stairs, into the quiet room that had become hers. She didn't notice the black car parked across the street until she reached the corner. It was the same one she'd seen yesterday and the day before. She stopped. Marco was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her. He hadn't shaved in days, dark circles under his eyes, coat unbuttoned like he didn't feel the cold. He looked smaller than she remembered, less like the man, who'd ruled half the city, and more like someone who'd been hollowed out. She didn't move. He pushed off the car slowly, took one step toward her. She took one step back. He stopped. Isabella, he said. His voice cracked on her name. She wrapped her arms around herself, protective. Don't. I just want to talk. You've said enough. She glanced at her stomach, barely hidden now, then back at him. Or not enough. Either way, it's done. He looked where her hands rested. His breath caught. She lifted her chin. Don't. He swallowed hard. Is it mine? She said. Flat. Final. not yours. Marco's face crumpled just for a second, before he forced it back into something harder. I know what I did. I know I don't deserve to ask. But I need to know if Heezy. She laughed one short, bitter. You don't get to assume. He took another step, stopped when she tensed. I'm not here to take anything, he said quietly. I'm here because I can't breathe without knowing you're okay. Both of you. She stared at him, saw the tremor in his hands, the way he kept his distance like he was afraid she'd shatter if he came closer. I'm okay, she said. We're okay. Without you. The words landed like a slap. He nodded slowly. I know. Then why are you here? Because I can't stop looking. His voice broke. I wake up every morning thinking about the night I let them take you. I see your face when you walked away. I hear your voice on the voicemail you never answer. I see a kid on, sir, the street and wonder if he'd have your smile. And I hate myself more every day. She didn't speak. He kept going, words spilling out like he'd been holding them too long. I sold you to save everything else, and I lost the only thing that ever mattered. I paid off the debt. I burned the Russians out. I tore apart every man who touched you, but it didn't fix anything. It didn't bring you back. He looked at her stomach again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Every day, every second, I'm sorry. Silence stretched between them, cold, heavy. Then she spoke. I kept every voicemail. He blinked. I listened to them when I couldn't sleep, when the baby kicked too hard and I was scared, when I thought I couldn't do this alone. She met his eyes. I hated you for every word, and I hated myself for still caring. Marco's shoulders sagged. She took a breath. I named him Luca. His head snapped up. After you, she said quietly, because even if you broke me, you gave me him, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. Marco's eyes filled. He didn't try to hide it. I don't want him to grow up without knowing who his father is, she continued. But I won't let him grow up with a man who chooses power over people. So if you want INF, you want NEF, you want any part of this, you start from nothing. No empire, no deals, no more selling people like they're nothing. You start by proving you can be a father first, a man second, everything else, sir. Maybe later. Marco nodded slow, jerky. Okay, she studied him. I don't trust you yet. I know, Dad, but I'm willing to see if you can change that. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. She turned toward the stairs, paused. Come tomorrow, she said. 9. After my shift, we'll talk. About him. About what happens next. But if you disappear again, if you choose anything over Asile, make sure you never find us. Marco swallowed. I won't. She looked back at him, one long, searching look. Then she climbed the stairs. He watched until the door closed behind her. Then he got in the car, drove to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed. And for the first time in months, he let himself hope. Marco came at exactly 9 the next morning. Isabella heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, like he was giving her time to change her mind. She stood by the window, arms crossed over her stomach, watching the street below. Luca was asleep in the crib, tiny fist curled near his cheek, breathing soft and even. She opened the door before he could knock. He looked worse than yesterday, eyes bloodshot, coat rumpled. The same one he'd worn the night everything ended. He held a small paper bag in one hand. Didn't try to step inside until she moved aside. She closed the door behind him. The room felt smaller with him in it. He looked around, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the single chair, the crib against the wall. His gaze lingered on Luca. He's beautiful, he said, sir. Quietly. Isabella didn't answer, just watched him. Marco set the bag on the table, diapers, formula, a couple onesies. I didn't know what size. She glanced inside. Brand new, the good kind, not the cheap store brands she bought. Thank you, she said. Flat, not warm. He nodded, shoved his hands in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. She gestured to the chair. Sit, he did. She stayed standing, arms still crossed, back against the wall. Silence stretched. Then she spoke. I kept your voicemails because I needed to hear your voice. Not because I forgave you. Not because I missed. Because Luca deserves to know what his father sounded like, even if it was just apologies on a phone. Marco's throat worked. I meant every word. I know. She looked at the crib. But words don't change what you did. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't expect them to. Then what do you expect? Nothing. He met her eyes. I just want to be here. For him. For whatever you'll allow. She studied him, searching for the lie, the manipulation, the old Marco who always had an angle. She didn't find it. I have rules, she said. He nodded once. Name them. No disappearing. No late nights. No business calls that take you away for days. If you're in his life, you're in it every day. You show up. You stay. Done. You don't buy him. No expensive gifts. No trying to win him with money. He gets love, time, safety. That's it. Marco's jaw tightened just a fraction. Die, sir. Can do that. You don't touch me unless I say so. No hugs. No kisses. No trying to fix what's broken with your hands. You earn trust. You don't demand it. He looked down at his hands. I understand. And if you ever choose anything over him, you're gone. No second chances. No explanations. You walk away and you never come back. Marco lifted his head. I swear it. She watched him for a long moment. Then she walked to the crib, lifted Luca carefully. The baby stirred, blinked sleepy gray eyes, and yawned. She turned back to Marco. Hold him. Marco stood slowly, crossed the room like he was walking on glass. She placed Luca in his arms. The baby looked up at him, curious, unafraid. Marco's breath hitched. Luca reached out, touched Marco's cheek with a tiny hand. Marco closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his face. He didn't wipe it away. Isabella watched. She didn't speak, just watched the man who'd sold her hold their son like he was the only thing keeping him alive. After a long minute, she said, You can stay for an hour. Every morning you can feed him, change him, hold him, but when I say time's up, you leave. No arguments. Marco nodded. Thank you. She looked at Luca, now nuzzling against Marco's chest, then back at Marco. This isn't forgiveness, she said quietly. This is a chance. For him, not for you. I know. She turned away, walked to the window. Marco sat in the chair, rocked Luca gently. The train whistle sounded in the distance. Isabella stared out at the tracks. And for the first time in months, the loneliness felt a little less heavy. The days blurred into weeks, then months. Marco came every morning at 9. No excuses, no cancellations. He knocked softly, waited for her to open the door, and stepped inside like he was entering a church. Isabella kept the rules rigid. 1 hour. No more. He could hold Luca, feed him, change him, rock him, but he left when the hour was up. No lingering. No conversations that drifted too far from the baby. She watched him like a hawk, searching for cracks, for the old Marco to slip through. She never found them. Luca grew fast. By 4 months he was rolling over, grabbing at everything, laughing when Marco made silly faces or blew raspberries on his belly. The first time Luca reached for Marco's face, teeny fingers curling around his nose, Marco froze. Tears slipped down his cheeks before he could stop them. Isabella pretended not to notice, but she saw. She began to let the hour stretch. 10 minutes. 15. Not because she trusted him yet. Because Luca lit up when Marco walked in. The baby would kick his legs. C-U-R-A. Reach out with both arms. Isabella couldn't take that away from him. One morning Marco arrived with a small wooden toya, simple rattle shaped like a star. Hand-carved, no brand, no price tag. He held it out to her first. I made it, he said quietly. Took a while. I'm not good with my hands anymore. Not like I used to be. She took it, turned it over. The wood was smooth, sanded, carefully, no sharp edges. She handed it to Luca. The baby grabbed it immediately, shook it, laughed. Marco watched. He soft, aching. Thank you, Isabella said. The words came out easier than she expected. He nodded. Didn't push for more. That afternoon, after Marco left, Isabella sat on the floor with Luca. The baby crawled toward her, giggling, the star rattle clutched in his fist. She lifted him into her lap. You like him, don't you? She whispered. Luca babbled something that sounded like agreement. She kissed his head. I'm trying, baby. I'm trying so hard. The next day she let Marco stay for breakfast. She cooked eggs, nothing fancy, just eggs and toast. He sat at the small table, Luca in his lap, and ate like a man who hadn't tasted food in years. They didn't talk much, but when Luca reached for Marco's coffee cup, Marco moved it gently away, laughing softly. Isabella watched. Something inside her shifted just a fraction. She didn't name it, not yet. One evening 6 months after Luca was born, Marco stayed longer than usual. Isabella didn't stop him. Luca had fallen asleep on his chest, small hand fisted in Marco's shirt. Marco didn't move, just sat there, rocking slowly, eyes on the baby like he was memorizing every breath. Isabella sat across from him, silent. Finally she spoke. "I still dream about that night." Marco's arms tightened around Luca just slightly. "I dream I'm back in that warehouse," she continued. "And you're there, but you don't cut the chains, sir. You just stand there, watching." He closed his eyes. "I wake up crying," she said. "Every time." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll be sorry for the rest of my life." She looked at Luca, peaceful, safe, loved. "I know." Marco opened his eyes, met hers. "I don't expect you to love me again," he said. "I don't even expect you to like me. I just want to be here. For him. For whatever scraps you'll give me." She studied him, really studied him. The man who'd sold her. The man who'd searched for her. The man who cried when their son reached for him. She stood, walked to the crib, took Luca from his arms gently and laid him down. Then she turned back to Marco. "Stay for dinner tomorrow," she said. "All 3 of us." Marco's breath caught. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. He nodded once. "Thank you." She walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold. "I love you," he said quietly. "I never stopped, even when I didn't deserve to." She didn't answer, just watched him walk down the stairs. Then she closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time since the rain let herself hope, the first time Marco stayed for dinner, Isabella cooked pasta. Nothing special, just spaghetti, canned sauce, a little garlic she'd bought on sale. The kitchen was small, the table barely fit 3 chairs, but she set it anyway. 3 plates, 3 forks, a single candle she'd found in a drawer, white, half-burned, no scent. Luca sat in his high chair, banging a spoon against the tray, grinning at everything. Marco helped her serve, moved carefully, didn't try to touch her when he passed the bowl, didn't sit too close. They ate in near silence. Luca babbled, threw a noodle, laughed when it stuck to Marco's shirt. Marco smiled, small, real, the kind that reached his eyes. He wiped the sauce from Luca's chin with a napkin, gentle, patient. Isabella watched. She didn't speak much, but she didn't tell him to leave when the hour passed. After dinner, Marco cleared the table without being asked, washed the dishes while she gave Luca a bath. When she came back, Luca, in fresh pajamas, hair damp and curling, he was drying the last plate. He looked up. She leaned against the doorframe. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." She nodded once. They moved to the living room. Just a couch, a rug, a small TV she rarely turned on. Marco sat on one end. She sat on the other. Luca crawled between them, tugging at Marco's sleeve until Marco lifted him onto his lap. The baby nestled against Marco's chest like it was the safest place in the world. Isabella watched Luca's eyes droop, watched Marco rock him slowly, watched the way Marco's hand spanned the baby's back, protective, reverent. She felt something loosen inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not love, but the absence of hate. It was quiet. Then she said, "He likes you." Marco looked at her over Luca's head. "I like him." She almost smiled. Almost. Luca fell asleep. Marco carried him to the crib, laid him down, tucked the blanket around him, pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. Isabella stood in the doorway. When Marco turned, their eyes met. She stepped aside. He walked past her, slow, careful. At the door he paused. "Thank you," he said. "For tonight." She nodded. He left. She locked the door behind him, leaned against it, closed her eyes, and let out a breath she'd been holding for more than a year. The next night he came again. This time she made soup. They ate. Luca played on the rug between them. Marco told a story, quiet, simple, about a boy who got lost in the woods and found his way home by following the stars. Luca listened wide-even, though he didn't understand the words. Isabella listened too. When the story ended, she said, "You used to tell me stories." Marco looked at her. "I did. You were good at them." He gave a small, sad smile. I was good at a lot of things before I ruined them. She didn't argue. She just looked at Luca now yawning, rubbing his eyes. Time for bed, she said. Marco stood, helped her lift Luca. They walked to the crib together. She laid the baby down. Marco stayed a step back watching. When Luca was settled, she turned to Marco. You can stay a little longer, she said. If you want. He exhaled. I want. They sat on the couch again, not touching, just sitting. Luca's soft breathing came through the monitor. The train rumbled past. Isabella spoke first. I still dream about that night. Marco tensed. But the dreams are changing, she continued. Sir. Sometimes you're there, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you cut the chains, sometimes you just stand there. He looked down at his hands. I deserve the bad ones, maybe. She paused. But last night I dreamed you were holding Luca. And he was laughing. And I wasn't scared. Marco closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. I want that dream to be real, he said. Every day. She looked at him, really looked. Saw the man who'd sold her. Saw the man who'd searched for her. Saw the man who cried when their son reached for him. Saw the man who stayed. She reached out slowly, placed her hand over his. He froze. She didn't pull away. I'm not ready to love you again, she said quietly. But I'm ready to let you try. Marco turned his hand over, laced his fingers with hers. Thank you, he whispered. They sat like that until the train came again, until Luca sighed in his sleep, until the room felt less empty. The mornings became routine. Marco arrived at 9. Isabella opened the door before he knocked. Luca would already be awake, cooing in his crib, arms waving the moment he heard Marco's voice. Marco would lift him, press a kiss to his dark curls, and carry him to the kitchen where Isabella had coffee waiting. They didn't talk much at first, just small things. Lucas' new tooth, the way he'd started pulling himself up on the couch, how he loved the rattle Marco had carved, but the silences weren't heavy anymore. They were comfortable, familiar. One Saturday, Isabella, sir, let him stay all day. No rules, no clock watching. They took Luca to the small park behind the hardware store. Marco pushed the stroller while Isabella walked beside him. Luca babbled at the birds, reached for leaves, laughed when the wind touched his face. Isabella watched. Marco saw the way he kept one hand near Luca at all times, the way his shoulders relaxed when the baby grabbed his finger. They sat on a bench. Luca crawled between them on the blanket they'd spread. He pulled himself up using Marco's knee, stood wobbly for a second, then plopped back down with a delighted squeal. Isabella laughed trill, unguarded. Marco looked at her like he'd never heard anything more beautiful. You're good with him, she said quietly. I'm trying to be. You are. She paused. He loves you. Marco's throat worked. I love him more than anything. She looked away toward the trees, the sky, anywhere but his eyes. I still think about that night, she said. Not every day, but sometimes. When I'm alone, when Lucas asleep, I wonder if I'll ever stop. Marco didn't look away from her. You shouldn't have to. I did that to you. I live with it every day. She turned back to him. Do you? Every second. His voice was rough. I see your face when you walked away. I hear the bus pull out. I feel the moment I realized what I'd lost. I don't want to forget. Forgetting would mean I don't deserve any of this. Luca crawled into her lap. She lifted him, kissed his head. Marco watched, sir. Then slowly he reached out. Palm up, she looked at his hand. After a long moment, she placed hers in it. He closed his fingers gently around hers. Neither spoke. Luca babbled something happy, reached for Marco's face. Marco smiled soft, broken, hopeful. They sat like that until the sun dipped low. When they walked home, Luca fell asleep in the stroller. Marco carried him upstairs. Isabella followed. In the apartment, Marco laid Luca in the crib, tucked the blanket, kissed his forehead. Then he turned to her. I should go, he said. She stepped closer. Stay. He searched her face. For dinner? He asked carefully. She shook her head. For the night. His breath caught. She took his hand, led him to the couch. They sat closer this time. Luca's soft breathing came through the monitor. Isabella rested her head on Marco's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, slow, tentative. She didn't pull away. They stayed like that, quiet, still until the train came. until Luca sighed in his sleep, until the room felt full. Isabella spoke into the dark. I'm not ready to say I love you. I know, but I'm ready to stop hating you. Marco pressed his lips to her hair. That's more than I deserve. She lifted her head, looked at him. Maybe, she said, but it's what Luca deserves. He nodded. They sat in silence again. Then she stood, walked to the bedroom, left the door open. Marco followed. They lay on opposite sides of the bed space between them. Luca's breathing filled the quiet. Isabella, reached across the gap, found Marco's hand. He laced his fingers with hers. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, hearts beating, not whole, but healing. The apartment above the hardware store never felt big enough, but somehow it held them all. Luca turned one on a quiet Saturday in April. The sun came through the single window in long, warm bars across the floor. Isabella woke early before Marco, before Luca hand-made pancakes, not from a mix, from scratch. Flour on her nose, eggs cracked carefully, a little vanilla she'd saved for months. She stacked them on a plate, added sliced bananas in the shape of a smiley face, and carried it to the living room. Marco was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug with Luca in his lap. The baby toddler now was trying to stack wooden blocks Marco had carved. They kept falling. Luca laughed every time bright, unrestrained, and Marco laughed with him, deep and real. Isabella paused in the doorway, watched them, felt something settle in her chest, something that had been restless for too long. She set the plate on the low table. "Happy birthday, baby," she said. Luca looked up, grinned, reached for her with both arms. She lifted him, kissed his cheek, set him back down. Marco watched her quiet, careful, like he still expected her to change her mind. She sat beside him, handed him a pancake. He took it. They ate in comfortable silence while Luca smeared banana on his face and giggled. After breakfast, Marco pulled a small box from his coat pocket. He handed it to Isabella. She opened it slowly. Inside was a thin silver chain, a small pendant, a star, hand-carved from the same wood as Luca's rattle. "I made it," he said, "for you, for the nights you sat by the window waiting for the train, so you'd remember you're not alone anymore." She lifted it out, fingers trembling just slightly. Marco took it from her, stepped behind her, fastened the clasp around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, gentle, reverent. She turned to face him, looked up. He didn't move. She did. She rose on her toes, pressed her lips to his soft at first, then deeper. He kissed her back like he'd been waiting a lifetime, hands on her waist, careful, asking. She answered. When they parted, foreheads together, she whispered, "I love you." Marco's breath hitched. "I love you too," he said. "Always did. Always will." Luca clapped his hands, delighted by the kiss, by the closeness, by everything. They laughed soft, together. Later that afternoon, they took Luca to the park. Marco pushed the stroller. Isabella walked beside him. Luca babbled at the sky. They sat on the same bench under the oak tree. Luca crawled onto Marco's lap, reached for Isabella. She lifted him between them. He looked from one to the other, gray eyes, bright, and said his first clear word, "Dada." Marco froze. Isabella's eyes filled. Luca said it again, louder, happier. "Dada." Marco pulled Luca close, buried his face in the boy's curls. Isabella reached over, wiped the tear from Marco's cheek. Then she leaned in, kissed him again. Right there, in the open, in the sunlight. No hiding, no shame, just them. When they pulled apart, Luca giggled, clapped again. Marco looked at Isabella. "I want to marry you," he said. "For real this time. No deals, no force, just us, choosing." She smiled, small, real, the first full smile she'd given him since the rain. "I want that too." They sat there until the sun dipped low. Luca yawned, rubbed his eyes. Marco lifted him. Isabella stood. They walked home, hand in hand, Luca between them. The apartment waited, small, imperfect, theirs. That night, after Luca was asleep, they stood in the doorway. Marco turned to her. "I'm never leaving," he said. She took his hand. "I know." They walked to the bedroom together, closed the door, and for the first time since the rain, they slept in each other's arms. No space between them. No silence, just breathing, together. The train came at 11:47 a.m. They didn't hear it. They were already home. If this beautiful, hard-earned ending Luca's first data, Isabella's full smile, Marco's promise under the stars filled your heart the way it filled theirs. Please leave a like and subscribe so I can keep sharing these stories of betrayal, redemption, and love that refuses to stay broken. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with Marco, Isabella, and little Luca until the very last breath.